Hi everyone. Now, why would I be doing a video when the first debate between two presidential candidates is occurring and when my hair looks like a hot mess, which is what the astrology of this time looks like too. So I think it's a perfect analogy, and I'll go ahead and put the video, and you guys can of course watch it whenever you get to it. Before we get to the video related to the full moon in Aries, which is on October 1st, there are a couple of transits or a couple of planets moving forward that are worth addressing. The planet Saturn went direct on the 28th of October, yesterday. Jupiter has already gone direct on September the 13th, and Pluto goes direct on October the 4th. The dates may vary slightly depending on where you are, all in the sign of Capricorn. Jupiter went direct September 13th, Saturn yesterday, Pluto October 4th. Saturn and Jupiter move out of Capricorn, into Aquarius in the middle of December, and they conjunct in Aquarius, in the first degree of Aquarius, on December the 21st. Jupiter and Pluto conjunct for the third time in Capricorn on November the 12th. So 3 planets moving direct within 3 weeks of each other. They've been retrograde over the summer. And Jupiter and Pluto meet up on November the 12th. That is a conjunction that I have correlated with an expansion of COVID as a virus, as we've headed to each of the Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions, the first one being the most dramatic. And the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction has not happened yet, but it is astrologically one of those conjunctions that we all watch. It's referred to as the Great Conjunction. And what is being spoken about this year loudly is that whenever there has been a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, either a president of the United States I'm going to phrase it this way. There's a high probability of an assassination attempt on the sitting president of the United States. The question is which president will be sitting by the time the conjunction occurs. And as you head to the conjunction, as I've mentioned to you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. As you know, when it comes to what I will call sensational or internet astrology, I kind of take the back seat, and if things are going to roll out a certain way, they're going to happen a certain way, and they're in God's hands, then we're going to let them happen. With the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it's not something that can necessarily be ignored, because there is a correlation as people look at this. And I think if you just do a Google search on Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions and check out, and you'll see Jupiter-Saturn Great Conjunction, and Astrology King is a good website where upcoming conjunctions are listed and there can be certain descriptions on it. I have a feeling if you do a Google conjunction, you'll be able to come up with a certain amount of literature. I'm going to let you look at the literature. I'm going to let you figure out what that means to you or not. When it comes to conjunctions, it's heading towards those conjunctions that is important, and not necessarily the actual date of the conjunction itself. Oh my God, something's going to happen on that date. No, it's going to happen as these planets approach each other. What is more important is that Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn, a sign associated with the maintenance and winning of the game, however the game is laid out in society, the sign of the ruler, the sign of conventional success, the sign of determination, the sign of material success, the sign of winning the game, the sign of perseverance, the sign of discipline, it is a conservative sign. Aquarius, with Jupiter and Saturn are moving, and where Saturn had briefly moved into between March and June of this year, is not a conservative sign. Interestingly, both of these signs are ruled by Saturn. Aquarius is also ruled in modern terms by Uranus. So it's a fascinating year for an election, and between March and June of this year, the one thing that we can safely say that we saw, and yes, I'm focused more on the United States as part of this video, is a rise in social unrest. Let me call it that. Very Aquarian. Very Aquarian. So we're going to see where it is that we're going to go. On November the 3rd is the presidential election. October the 25th, Mercury goes retrograde. You can't make this stuff up. November the 3rd, it goes direct. So on the date of the election, Mercury will be not retrograde, not direct, but stationary. Mercury stationary is when we feel the lack of a fast-moving Mercury or a moving Mercury the most. Those are the most confusing of days. So what are we going to be looking forward to on November the 3rd? Then, of course, Mercury goes direct after November the 3rd. We have the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction on November the 12th. And December the 21st, we have the Great Conjunction. Where on earth are we headed? On a more personal level, which is what these videos are more interesting on some level. I have learned this year, I have tended to be an astrologer who tends to, when it comes to what I would call internet astrology, kind of stay away from it. But this year, I have really paid a lot more attention to some of these kinds of transits, because as COVID broke and as we went into what I will call the craziness of this year, it became very hard for me to be able to look away from what these three planets have been up to, including the last of the eclipses that occurred in Capricorn on June the 5th of this year, or thereabouts, June the 5th. And so, was it June the 5th? No, it was, forgive me, sorry about that. It was July the 5th. It was July the 5th. It was July the 5th. Okay. July the 5th of this year. July the 4th, July the 5th. So, the sign of Capricorn, wherever it sits in our chart, has been under a lot of stress and pressure. And the stress and pressure increased, as I've mentioned to you before, in December 2017 when Saturn entered Capricorn, and then it started to increase even more after July 2018 when the eclipses of releasing something started to occur in this part of the chart. So the energies have been complex and complicated. The eclipses of release suggest that we reached a point of development in this particular sign and where it sits in our chart, and which house it occupies and what that house stands for, where who we are and the behaviors and patterns that we have accumulated are no longer serving us. So something needs to be let go of in order for us to develop further. Something that has become an accumulated strength starts to become a loss, a way of being, something physical, a relationship, whatever it is. So that has needed to be shed. Whenever Saturn enters a sign, it really starts to work with us around our behaviors and patterns and boundaries, self-defeating behaviors and patterns that are holding us back and that are not serving us and that are not allowing us to meet our potential. So then Saturn starts to hammer us and tries to get us to be our best self and is relentless. I was going to say ruthless. I'm going to leave that to Pluto. Relentless in working with us and time and again repeating lessons until they have been incorporated, until we stand up to them, until we get back on the board and make another effort, until we acquire the skill that we need to, until we reset the boundaries that we need to, until we build the muscles that we need to, until we keep showing up in order to defeat what we need to defeat. Wherever Pluto is, there's a set of changes in death and transformation that we can really do nothing about. Pluto, wherever it goes, it's like this wrecking, it just kind of drags, it creates the change, it creates a fated change that you just have to accept and live with. You know, an astrologer likened Pluto's impact very much to burning down the barn so you can see the moon. I'll leave that here. It's happening in Capricorn. When Jupiter entered Capricorn in December of 2019, Jupiter is the one sign, although it's compromised in Capricorn, it is weak in Capricorn. Jupiter is a planet of expansion and faith and risk-taking and adventure, and Capricorn is not a sign that is associated with any of, if there's enterprise and there's endeavor, it is calculated. If there's risk-taking, it is careful, it is meticulous. It's not I'm going to take a leap and I'm filled with the Spirit of God and the universe and I'm feeling expansive. It does not support those qualities unless you are extraordinarily grounded. Irrespective, Jupiter's entry into any part of the chart does promise the end of a 12-year cycle, that 12 to 13-year cycle, and the start of a 12 to 13-year cycle. And Jupiter's entry The first of the transits that we had that marked the social and political turmoil that we've seen in 2020, including COVID, occurred when Saturn and Pluto were conjunct in December or early January of 2019, 2020. I'll let you do the research. After that, Saturn and Pluto have not been conjunct again, although during the month of September, they have gotten closer and closer. Now, Saturn goes direct yesterday, and Pluto starts to go direct, but they're not going to move. Saturn is going to separate from Pluto. Jupiter's conjunction with Pluto 3 times, because Jupiter conjuncted Pluto when it was direct, then when it was retrograde, and now direct again on November the 12th, has coincided, at least to me as I've observed it, with, as I've mentioned already, the expansion of COVID and the dealing with it. This is the third and final conjunction. Where is it leading us? And then we have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the Great Conjunction in Aquarius, December 21st. But this is where these conjunctions are heading towards. What does this mean? Where does it lead to? You cannot ignore the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. In terms of it being a real burning off point, a real ending of the old and moving into the new. And it is the spirit of ending of the old that becomes really pronounced. When I look at where we are at astrologically and where we're being asked to finish up, not just release, finish up, tie up, dot the I's, cross the T's on tasks that have been pending, looming on our to-do list since the middle of July of 2018, and start to focus on the new set of tasks that are appearing on our table, deal with the new menu, the new set of dishes that are being plated for us starting April of this year, and start to take more and more hold after yesterday's video on the eclipse starting this past week and moving forward into 2021 and even 2022. We are in the middle of this churn. Some of the churn in July and August and September was about moving towards the new, while dealing with the past. Now it's the planets in the sign where we associate with the completion of past activities that start to move ahead and accelerate as we head towards December and into 2021. So we're in the middle of this churn, where in July, August, September, it was much more forward-moving, but inconclusive because we still had these pending activities that needed to be done. And now it's these past planets that were retrograde in the sign of Capricorn for a few years that are going to be going direct and are going to gather momentum as we head into November, December. Now, as I've mentioned to you, by the middle of November, Mercury will be direct November the 3rd, and Mars will be direct November the 13th. So middle of November forwards, this kind of churning activity will finally end, and all planets will be direct, as far as we are concerned for the sake of this recording right now. And we're going to see fast-moving, conclusive change. Forward movement is the right term as we head towards January of 2021. All of this coincides when it comes to the election. When it comes to the sign of Capricorn, the direct movement of Jupiter especially, I liken to green shoots emerging in a sign that has been experiencing a forest fire pretty much since December 2017, but even more intensely since July 2018, certainly through 2019, and certainly in 2020. The forest fire analogy is a little bit unfortunate, but very relevant in many respects. So wherever the sign of Capricorn is in your chart, it is time. And with Jupiter and Saturn, it is a co-creative process. When it comes to planets like Mercury and Venus especially, and the Moon, which is not technically a planet, but we consider it a planet, and the Sun to some extent, but especially Mercury, Venus, and Mars, it's a lot about us and us responding to what we want to initiate and what we want to do. With Mars, the balance starts to shift because often it's external things that we have to deal with, but they're still local. There's still external things that are being created by other people. When it comes to Jupiter and Saturn, the balance between what we are doing and what we want to do and where we want to take things, and what not just other people, but God and fate dish up to us, that balance becomes much more evened out. So as we head between now and December, Jupiter and Saturn already have a plan and have clarity about what they want to do for us. In Saturn's case, if we have been good with what the sign of Capricorn has been teaching us, it may bring conclusion, reward, and results that are long-lasting in terms of the foundation they create. If we have been naughty, Saturn is going to dish out consequence. That sounds very severe and very scary. The purpose of the consequence is, again, to say, I need you back on the board. I need to be sure that you have learned this lesson. You have been weak, very Saturnian kind of concepts. And I need to make sure before I leave this sign that you are clear about what behaviors and patterns you are never to repeat again, because if you do, Saturn is the strict teacher. It is working towards your highest potential. If you continue to engage in those behaviors and do not reform and do not step up to the plate in the way that Saturn has been trying to teach you to do so by giving you repeated lessons and challenges of a certain kind since December 2017, then it will sabotage you. In Jupiter's case, Jupiter is like, enough already, sign of Capricorn. I'm going to create these green shoots. I'm going to take us in a new direction. It is time to end a 12-year cycle. It is time to start a 12-year cycle. Pluto, you go continue to be your scary self. I, the king of the gods, am going to create an auspicious new beginning here. And then I will contend with meeting up with Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn, very opposite energies. Not a good conjunction for Jupiter necessarily, but you can't count Jupiter out. Jupiter is happier in Aquarius than in Capricorn. Saturn is in Aquarius, a sign that it rules, but the energy is much more expansive, much more, I'm going to use the word liberal. The right word is progressive. Much more concerned with a much more rational and logical view of changes that need to occur on a social basis. Aquarius, a sign associated with social good and harmony, possibly medicine. So are we now, with this final conjunction, the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, seeing an expansion of COVID, but can we end up by December and January with greater clarity as to how to deal with this pandemic so that we can actually consider and start to open up? I'm not going to use the V word, vaccines, as though it's some sort of panacea, because depending on who you listen to, the idea is that it's too rushed, not tested enough, not coming fast enough, blah, blah, blah. And for some people, never really a solution, complete in and of itself. So however it is, the question is, one more time, and we are already seeing the expansion. We are already seeing countries consider lockdowns, try to implement lockdowns. As we head towards November the 11th, where is this taking us? COVID, social unrest, political unrest, in the sign of Capricorn, associated with rulers and rulerships and traditional values. As I saw Saturn leave Aquarius and come back into Capricorn in June, July, I also saw a dramatic shift in tone socially from a certain amount of weight and power behind things like the Black Lives Movement or more Aquarian movements, come back to much more conservative values in a certain sense. So all of this continues to play out on a social and a political level. I'm alerting you about expansion when it comes to COVID, alerting you towards the forest fire needing to be quelled, but really alerting you to being in the middle of a churn, alerting you that the urgency to finish up with past activities and lessons that we've needed to be learned is here. There will be an acceleration, there will be consequence, there might be reward, there will be new beginnings wherever Capricorn is in your chart. However you choose to deal with the social and political, and my strong recommendation is for you to, the quote that comes to mind with this kind of astrology is the famous Betty Davis as Margot Channing quote in All About Eves: fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night. It's going to be a bumpy night. And whatever happens socially and politically, you're going to have to determine, no matter who you are, no matter what your political affiliation, you are going to have to make your own relationship with how much you let news and information related to COVIDs and shutdowns and non-shutdowns and the politics affect your own trajectory. It is likely that it will, but your own trajectory doesn't need to change. If something shuts down and you can't get to something for a few weeks or a few months, take it in stride. The larger question that you really need to ponder where the sign of Capricorn is in your chart is, what do you need to finish up? And most importantly, how do you move forward in this part of your chart, guys? This is critical. How do you move forward in this part of your chart in the spirit of a phoenix that is being born out of the ashes of this forest fire? If it is in the part of the chart that has to do with health, you absolutely have to adopt a new routine. If it has affected your relationships and your committed partnerships and you're dealing with either marriage or divorce, you've got to contend with, you've got to commit to the lessons that have been learned. If it's financial, you've got to commit to those new beginnings. Not easy what this part of the chart has gone through, but the opportunity, and if you're really paying attention, I am telling you, I am seeing it when it comes to my clients, if you're really paying attention, the lessons are there. They're painful, they've been a little bit stunning, but the lessons are there. Take them seriously. I've already laid out more than I normally and typically do political astrology. I never really focus on that on this channel, on any channel, but I've had to with these transits. We can't wait to be done. But this phoenix rising out of the ashes kind of description is really apt in this part of the chart. So if you know where Capricorn sits in your chart and what house it occupies, or what part of the chart has been under a certain amount of pressure since the end of 2017, but especially after the middle of 2018, all through 2019, all through 2020, if there are lessons, if there are behaviors, if there are things that you really feel like you need to be done with these Cancer Capricorn eclipses and all these planetary transits in Capricorn, roll up your sleeves, get it done, do not move back, and most importantly, identify where Saturn has spanked you on the behind, humbly incorporate those lessons, see where it has brought you to your knees, use Jupiter's opportunity to commit to a new beginning and a new 12-year cycle and move forward. How this plays on socially and politically, with planets like Jupiter and Saturn, some of this is very much in God's hands. I am so sorry about that, Light. I did wait really rather too late to do this. And as I said, my hair is a metaphor for the astrology. And right now it is getting COVID long and needs to be cut and given some sort of shape. Those of you who watch my channel know that I talk about my hair a lot. It's a source of topic of conversation. I'm glad to end this video a little bit more lightly. We're going to move into the full moon in Aries video in the next 48 hours. As you know, the signs of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, Gemini, Sagittarius, Scorpio are going to take on more and more pressure. We'll talk about that in a second in the next video. But for now, just know that the last part of 2020 has begun. How interesting that I'm actually doing this video now that I think about it. How interesting that I'm doing this video on the night of the first presidential debate. It is time to fasten our seatbelts. It is going to be a bumpy night as we head towards 2021. I wish you all the best. This, in some way, we need to burst this sit. We need to put these energies behind us. We need to be done with this year. And we are moving that way, but this year is not going to go out with a whimper. It's going to go out with a bang. Okay, sorry to alarm you with that Jupiter-Saturn stuff about presidential assassinations. Do your research. To be clear, there hasn't been a presidential assassination associated with every conjunction, but the research is really kind of interesting. So just as I don't typically do these kinds of readings on this video, but you can do the research and figure out whatever it is that it tells you or not if you're so inclined. More importantly, do not ignore the personal lessons that have shown up where Capricorn sits in your chart. Do not. At least some part of the astrology now is moving forward. We have Mercury retrograde October 15th. Mars is already retrograde. It is a churn. We are adjusting to a certain amount of forward movement that occurred in August and early September and middle of July onwards. We're adjusting. And then by the time it's the middle of November, I mean, the roller coaster is going to start to move into December so fast that this fasten your seatbelts analogy, right now we're just kind of fastening the seatbelts and going, is this going to be bumpy? It is going to be bumpy. All right? If you found this video useful, helpful, whatever, even though it is so dark and there's this bright light behind me, feel free to share it, tell your friends about it, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button. Really, my videos are not always this dark. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button so that you are notified whenever I do a new video, and my contact information will be in the description box below, and you can contact me about rates related to either readings, or else I also create easy to read versions of your chart that show you which planets are in which signs and which houses and what those houses stand for. Do not send me your personal information without first inquiring about rates and being sure that you want to move forward. And by personal information, I mean things like your birth date and birth time. I don't want them to be sitting around in emails on servers unless you really know that you want to make a purchase. And so inquire about rates first so you're clear, and we'll take it from there. Okay? Moving towards the full moon in Aries, which we're already starting to feel, and that is going to be my next video over the next 48 hours. Thanks for listening to this one.